Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have with us Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, Director General of Institute of Applied Manpower Research, a research body attached to the Planning Commission which looks at employment trends in India in a very detailed way. Welcome to our show, Dr. Mehrotra. One of the figures, key findings of your report, which is with the Planning Commission, is that in the last 7-8 years, employment in agriculture, people in agriculture employment have moved out and moved out substantially. I'm told there's a figure of 30 million plus?
36 million.
36 million people have moved out of agriculture and probably seeking employment in industry and services. And I'm told this is the first time such a big shift, demographic shift out of agriculture sector into manufacturing is happening. Well, some of the Western economies witnessed this 40, 50 years ago. Now, please tell us something about this. What does this indicate?
This indicates that we have come very close to what used to be called the Arthur Lewis or Lewisian turning point. Okay. Because you see, what happens with development is that as per capita income rises, one would also expect structural transformation to take place. And
people moving out of agriculture
into non-agriculture.
Manufacturing and services.
Absolutely. We've seen a significant shift in the structure of output in our economy over the last 2 decades in particular. Sure. But the shift in the structure of employment was not happening. Okay. It was happening, but it was happening very slowly.
And I'm sure a lot of economists were lamenting this, even politicians.
And rightly so.
First 60 years after independence, no shift of people from agriculture to...
In absolute terms. You see, this is the remarkable thing that, that there's a turnaround after 2004-5, that for the first time in the history of our country, there was an absolute decline in the numbers of those working in agriculture. Yeah. Now, some people perceive this as bad news. There's too much distress in agriculture, that's why people are leaving. It's not entirely true. Yes, there was an increase in employment in agriculture in the first half of the decade, 2000-2005, which was driven by distress in agriculture. Sure. Agriculture was growing slowly. But the interesting thing is that during the 11th plan period and even since then, agriculture has been growing rapidly and yet people are leaving. So there's mechanization taking place in agriculture. So there's productivity.
So you're saying that this period is also accompanied by a relatively high growth in agriculture.
That's right. Yeah. This is the interesting thing. So incomes are obviously rising in agriculture also. Yeah. But that's not the main reason. The other thing is that
structural transformation.
That's right. You see, even in rural areas, people, as they were leaving agriculture, they were getting jobs in construction activity. Yeah. You are in any Mufassil town or you're driving down and you will see every second shop is a construction related shop. Yeah. Why is that? Because, even kacha houses throughout, even UP, Bihar, they are turning into pakka houses. Yeah. But of course, real estate is booming in the cities. Sure. So people, when they were leaving agriculture, they were joining construction, both in urban and rural. Okay. The other big source of demand for workers from agriculture has arisen from the infrastructure investment that happened massively, especially since 2004.
Like roads, etc.
Roads, bridges, ports, airports, you name it. Yeah. All of that has been.
All this is taking employment away from agriculture into.
That's right. But it's not bad news that people are moving out of agriculture, because as fewer people are working in agriculture, wages have risen, so consumption expenditures have risen. There's, productivity increases because mechanization happens, and so that's very good news. And we still have 49% of our workers in agriculture producing barely 15 or 15% of total output in the economy. Sure. No, that's not good enough. Yeah. Productivity has to improve and increase much more in agriculture. So more people have to leave agriculture. So, no one should worry about that. Okay. Now let me come to the non-agriculture side. Yeah. And there's a really important story to tell there. And that important story, Venu, is that after 2004-5, we have seen that as wages were rising, and wages were rising faster than inflation. Now, we all agree that there's a problem with food inflation in particular and overall inflation, and I think we've got to correct that, no question. And there are structural problems that have to be addressed. Otherwise,
Can you give us a sense? Is it true that real wages have been rising by about 7% in the last 6 years?
The real wages, I can't recall, the numbers vary between rural and urban, so don't pin me down on that. I'll have to look at the paper that we've written to recall exactly how much it has risen. But the fact that real wages have risen both in rural and urban areas has been reflected in rise in consumption expenditure.
Okay.
Because if you had not seen a rise in real wages, you wouldn't see the decline in poverty.
So you're saying there's a clear connection between so many people, 36 million people moving out of agriculture into better employment and the increase in consumption expenditure.
Absolutely.
And possibly inflation also, right?
You're right. It is part of the reason which is driving inflation. People are consuming new kinds of products. Those at the bottom of the pyramid are consuming new products.
Yeah.
They're consuming new kinds of food, milk, some a little bit of chicken. They are consuming fruits and vegetables, and these are all factors which are driving the prices up. But this is not the main reason. There are other reasons. So prices can be kept down if structural and supply side problems were dealt with.
Okay.
And it's very important that happens, because then that only increases the effect of rise in real wages, because that would raise consumption expenditure and demand for non-agricultural products, industrial products, services even more. Yeah. So there's a beautiful dynamic which is already in place.
Yeah.
Which is very good news.
Dr. Mehrotra, would you also argue that, intuitively I feel so, that the government of the day, I'm saying center as well as state governments, were probably not prepared for such a large number of people, 36 million coming out of agriculture into manufacturing, construction services, and this huge number of people would have had their demands, and therefore on the supply side they could not respond, which is what has given rise to today's politics of the aspirational young Indian. Is that too much of a leap, or is that a possibility?
It's certainly a possibility. But what is becoming clear and I think you're right in describing it like that, what is becoming clear is that people are much more aspirational.
Yeah.
And how did they become aspirational? Because real wages genuinely rose.
Yeah.
And that's what showed up in the rise in consumption expenditure. And therefore, they are expecting that their incomes will continue to rise. Yeah. So if you notice, one of the reasons why the nature of the politics might be shifting less towards the sectarian, the caste, the creed dimensions, towards more development. Everyone wants faster development.
I clearly see this Aam Aadmi Party, their base, political base, seems to be the kind of people that we are talking about. People who have moved out of agriculture and aspiring to stable employment in the cities, small towns.
Absolutely right. Venu, in fact, I would like to emphasize the following fact, which is not sufficiently recognized. That until 2004-5, for a 30-year period, we never saw a decline in the absolute numbers of the poor.
Okay.
Now, we raised the poverty line. They have a Tendulkar poverty line, which is comparable to the international poverty line of $1.25 per person per day. And there were 406-7 million people who were poor in 4-5. That fell in 7 years by 2011-12, by 138 million, down to 269 million. And this is driven by the rise in wages.
This would also be part of the same trend.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll take a small break here. It's getting very interesting. Please stay with us and don't go away. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are having a conversation with Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, DG of the Institute of Applied Manpower Research. Dr. Mehrotra, you were very interestingly, you were saying that in the last 6-7 years particularly, as we have seen 36 million people roughly coming out of agriculture into other forms of employment, this period also has seen poverty in absolute terms dropping by how many million people?
138 million.
138 million. Now, this would also be part of, would sort of contribute to the new kind of politics that you're seeing today.
You're right.
With young participating in it?
No, you're right. Let me turn to the politics in a minute. But let me just go back to the point I was making about the the economic aspirations of these people who were below the poverty line, and there was a density of people obviously around the poverty line who then, who came over the poverty line, and therefore what kinds of products they are consuming.
Exactly.
So what kind of products are they consuming? You see, they will not consume necessarily products of the kind that you and I consume. They will consume the following: processed food, so consumption of biscuits, Coke, milk, some amount of protein might increase. Second, they will consume more garments, apparel. They will consume more textiles for the family. They will buy new cloth to get shoes, clothes made. They will consume more shoes. So they are consuming more. So leather output is increasing. Leather employment is increasing. They will consume more mobiles. So that's in the services sector.
The kind of item that you see in a village heart. Or between a small town heart.
Absolutely. Right? So they will consume a little bit new furniture which they didn't have earlier. They would, you understand what I'm saying? They had a cart. Now they will have a slightly improved furniture in the home. These are precisely the sectors, Venu, which have seen a significant output increase and a significant employment increase.
And also construction. They would,
of course,
they would build a 2-room house.
Correct.
Closer to the road in the rural.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So you are seeing massive increases in employment in construction. Significant. There had been a 8 million increase in employment in construction between 2000 and 2005. But the employment in construction actually increased by some 35 million in the following 7 years.
Yeah, sure.
So people are building new houses, new shops, all of that.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful dynamic because the kind of products they are consuming generate more employment. You see, when you and I consume, for instance, VCRs, cars,
you're suggesting that they are more labor intensive.
The products they consume are more labor intensive as opposed to what we consume. And secondly, there is another dimension. There's decentralized production taking place of these products because they must be produced by small scale enterprises locally.
Local food processing units.
Local food processing, local production of biscuits and stuff like that. And those generate employment. So there's a beautiful dynamic there. That employment generation raises incomes and those same people then consume these kinds of products.
So are you, so would it be a stretch to say that some form of Gandhian economics is playing out in a decentralized way in these rural, urban, intersection of rural urban regions?
Well, perhaps, but it is a good and very positive dynamic because if there is one thing that you want to see as part of inclusive growth is that more jobs in non-agriculture are generated. What are one thing is fewer people are in agriculture, more non-agriculture jobs are happening, and wages are rising. So it's a beautiful dynamic from that point of view. It's underlining the inclusiveness of growth that is happening, which has been bemoaned that it was not happening earlier on, but it is certainly happening.
But tell me, Dr. Mehrotra, what you say is very interesting. Now, if you look at the fact that 36 million people have moved out of agriculture last 7 years, and the fact that agriculture growth has increased in this period.
That's right.
Productivity has increased.
That's right. And mechanization has happened.
Yeah. So this probably shows that there's a lot of mechanization happening. Because I tell you, recently I was covering elections in Madhya Pradesh, in really rural Madhya Pradesh, backward area. I saw combined harvesters moving on the road, coming from Punjab, being deployed there. So does this show that a lot of mechanization is happening?
Absolutely. In fact, I mean, if you travel into relatively low productivity agriculture of UP and Bihar in the rural areas, you see the following phenomenon at harvest time for, let's say, harvest of wheat. Earlier, the cutting of the wheat was done by hand with that sickle. Today, that cutting is done by a machine, not very big machine, which is dragged into the field by a tractor, a small tractor, not a big tractor. So you are seeing much more evidence of tractors. You are seeing this machine which is brought in, and then it cuts the stalk. Having cut the stalk, it actually removes the grain from the stalk, and then chops up the stalk for it to be used as fodder. So at that time, you will find very interesting phenomenon. There is a great deal of pollution in the air because this dust coming from the chopping is actually everywhere. So new source of pollution, but at the same time, a source of rise in productivity. So, and it means this is the kind of work which used to be done, let's say, by women. With women,
they've withdrawn from that work.
Yes. So there's another interesting dynamic because the girls, as they are getting, first child labor is declining because the 6 to 14-year-old children are all in school, especially girls, the 6 to 14. In addition, with all this, many chief ministers giving bicycles to girls who are entering class 9.
Absolutely.
So they are continuing beyond the age of 14. So the numbers of women entering, girls entering the labor force is declining.
Actually, it's so interesting that you're saying this. Because in all my travels during election to villages, far out villages, this is one single question that I ask village elders. How many girls went to school 15 years ago out of 10 and today? They would say 15 years ago, 3 out of 10 went to school. Today it's 9 and often 10 out of 10. So,
if you saw that in Rajasthan, that's so heartening. That's so remarkable because Rajasthan is one of the worst sort of gender discrimination.
And there's another phenomenon, again in line with what you were just saying, combined harvesters coming in or tractors. A lot of small farmers, less than 3 acres, families holding less than 3 acres, they aggregate their farm and outsourcing sowing and harvest work.
That's right.
This is happening fairly across the board, right?
You are right, but the interesting phenomenon is that there is a gap growing between non-agricultural casual work and agricultural work in rural areas. So, because that gap is growing, the relative shortage of workers in agriculture will continue to be felt. And very importantly, because girls are going to school and remaining in school increasingly, there is a new challenge.
So, you're anticipating a shortage of work
to some extent.
Okay, we'll come back to this point, but after a small break, please stay with us. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are having a very interesting conversation with Dr. Mehrotra on the big change in employment patterns in agriculture. Dr. Mehrotra, so what do you anticipate in agriculture if this pattern continues, people shifting out of agriculture to manufacturing and services, decentralized local manufacturing? So what happens to farm wages, shortage of farm labor? What do you anticipate?
Well, what is happening is already very good news. And no one should really worry that there will not be enough workers in agriculture because there are still enough workers in agriculture. We do need to, in some ways, the good news is that between 2005 and 2010, only about 8 to 9 million persons are joining the labor force. Yet in non-agriculture, we are generating about 8.5 million jobs per annum.
But are you satisfied? I mean,
I'm not satisfied.
Because in manufacturing, I'm told, our manufacturing is not robust enough to absorb
you're absolutely right.
Such a big shift.
Particularly, you're absolutely right. But that...
Tell me, how many million, is it 10 million or 12 million that enter the labor force every year?
It used to be 12 million between 2000 and 2005. It's down dramatically because the growth rate of population has been declining.
So 10 million enter the labor force.
Well, 12 million were entering between 2000 and 2005. That if you look at the estimates between 2005 onwards, it is no more than 8 to 9 million.
Every year.
It is down, 8 million. So if you generate 8 to 9 million new jobs non-agriculture.
So some of these go to agriculture, manufacturing, they get divided in the...
That's right. But you are seeing that you have to generate more jobs in non-agriculture
to absorb
those who are leaving agriculture. Plus there is a total number. So, I'm not satisfied with the numbers of jobs being created there. So what is the point I'm making? First, the fact we have to recognize is
So can you quantify why you're not satisfied? How much is happening today and how much should happen in manufacture and services absorption?
Right. Well, ideally, let me just sort of talk.
Give me a rough figure.
Ideally one should be able to get additional 5 million jobs in in construction, manufacturing and services taken together per annum. At least. It must be much. It should be more than that.
And what is it today?
Well, you know, for instance, we did rather well. We generated in construction 5 to 6 million jobs between 2009-10 to, you know, that's not bad, but we need to do more than that. You know, we generated about 9 million jobs between 2009-10 and 2011-12 in manufacturing. We need to do more than that. Notice that the jobs that were being generated in manufacturing were in lower end, low productivity, small scale
9 million per annum.
Well, no, in 2 years.
Okay, 2 years. Okay,
yes, 2 years. That's not good enough. This is what I mean to say, that you need to, you know, taking all three sectors together. I'm sorry, I was wrong when I was saying 5 million per annum. It should be at least 15 million per annum, all three taken together. Construction, yes, construction, manufacturing, services together. Because if you did that, in 5 years you can get to 75 million. And we have to aim at that. And for that, the following needs to happen. The employment elasticity of services is reasonable, it's not bad, but it's the top end manufacturing which is very become more capital intensive. But that's a problem. Exactly, because you see, there are two reasons for this happening. One is that the import intensity of manufacturing output has increased dramatically over the last 10 years. We import our intermediates, we also import capital goods. So both the capital goods and the intermediates. Now that's not very good. So China is really overrunning consumer goods, intermediates, but even capital goods.
So is there a crisis there?
I wouldn't call it a crisis, but there is something to be done. But policymakers have a role to play.
Some urgent measures should be taken for for import substitution in the open economy framework.
You are absolutely right. As long as we remain within the WTO framework, we have to be careful, very careful. The Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Industry have to work together very carefully to see where the import intensity of manufacturing can be improved, can be reduced. There is another dimension that needs to be kept in mind. This is on the large enterprise side. But on the small enterprise side, small enterprises don't become big. This is a very important problem and this is a problem on our policy side. Let me explain what I mean. If you look at the micro enterprises, the small enterprises, the medium enterprises. The government has a number of schemes, small as they are, but which are focused on micro enterprises and small enterprises. They tend to incentivize them. But the moment a firm becomes relatively large, its capital investment increases beyond 5 crores, those incentives all drop off. So there's no incentive to become large. You already have too many micro firms in our economy. Compare that to China, where it's much.
I get your point. All those. There's lessons to be learned there.
Absolutely.
But tell me a final question. Quick. With growth dropping to less than 5% last 2 years, and if this trend continues, do you think there could be a reversal in some of the good trends that you were talking about, which happened between 04, 05 and 09, 010, when we had average 8.5% growth?
Well, I think one source I've already talked about, that, rural consumption, urban consumption at the bottom of the pyramid has been increasing. So there is already a rise in domestic demand. And this is the kind of rise in domestic demand that China is hoping to achieve, and we are already achieving. You see, the international economy is a problem area. However, we have to continue to press ahead with increased exports. But we do need to take more action.
Domestic strategy should be more.
Absolutely. The manufacturing policy has to become much sharper. Thankfully, the 12th five-year plan is talking about an industrial policy. We have to be much, much sharper than we have been so far.
Thank you very much, Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, for talking to us. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.